So you've heard the dynamic EQs? You're not sure what they are or how to use them in your metal mix? I've got you covered. Let's jump right in. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start by explaining the problem we can solve with dynamic EQs. Then I'm going to explain what they are. And finally, I'm going to tell you how you can use them in your metal mixes with my top 5 dynamic EQ combination that I would recommend you use in your mix. The chapters should be in the video description or the timeline of this video, so you can jump to the specific part. You should keep in mind that in this video, I'm going to assume that you have some basic knowledge of what is an EQ, what is a compressor, and what is the difference between the two. Okay, let's start by explaining the problem we're trying to solve. I'm going to use a basic example that I think any metal musician would understand. Let's say that we have a riff that sounds like this. Basically, the riff has a lot of palm mutes, and the added low frequencies coming from the palm mutes might sound cool at first. But since we already have the bass and the kick playing, adding more low frequencies is rarely a good idea in a mix context. If you were to add more elements to the riff like vocals, keyboards, or even more guitars, these low frequencies will likely make your mix sound muddy and dull. Or even if you do not add more elements to this riff, these low frequencies might become a problem later on in the mastering phase. The chances are that you will want to control the low frequencies coming from the guitar. How can we do that? By using a regular EQ, of course. So using our ears, we can see that lowering the frequencies between 100 and 200 will help control the low frequencies from the palm mute. Let's have a listen. But if we keep this EQ throughout the entire song, we could argue that this frequency dip right here will alter the tone of the guitar, making it thinner than it should be, like in this riff for example. Bypassed.
That's not a problem, man. We could automate these EQ settings. Depending on the riff, we could bypass this EQ when the palm mute riff is not playing and put it back on what it is.
Yes, this could work, but now all the other notes in the palm mute riff will also have a thinner tone. We still have a problem.
Again, that's not a problem, man. We could manually automate the EQ depending on the notes that are played on the guitar.
Sadly, yes, this could also work. But it would need to be surgical, meaning it should be super precise to have the right effect, and it could take up hours of manual automations.
I didn't think of that. If only there was a tool that could help you do that, like AI or something.
No need for AI at all. This is where the dynamic EQs comes in. Before I explain what is a dynamic EQ, I think I should quickly explain what is sidechaining. Sidechaining is a basic mix technique that means sending the signal of a source track into a destination track to alter a parameter in this destination track. This technique is commonly used with compressors. In electronic music, for example, this is used quite a bit to use the signal of the kick to compress the bass, creating a bouncing effect. Or in radio and podcast, where the signal of the voice can be used to compress the music, making the music quieter when the speaker is talking.
Hey, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, hello, test, woo!
As you can hear and see, the automation is done for us. Back to our example, we will want to use a dynamic EQ to control the low frequencies coming from the palm mutes. In this specific case, we will use internal sidechaining, which means the signal of the guitars will influence its own EQ. I'm using Steinberg's Frequency 2 in this example, which is a plugin included with Cubase, but any EQ that has a sidechaining option might also work the same way. Let's use the node number 3 here. So by clicking on the single view here, I'm opening up the advanced panel here. Then I'm activating the dynamic section, which also activates the sidechain section, and it's set to default to internal. We already have our EQ bell here. Then we set the threshold parameter. This will let us control how much of the EQ is going to work. Lower threshold means more of an EQ change. Okay, this is a bit much here. Maybe something like this. With this particular EQ, we can set if we want to EQ only the mids, or the sides, or both, with a different setting for each, or a regular stereo here. But when we talk about low frequencies, I will want to use the mid only. You will want to use your ears to set all the other parameters, but I usually like to have a fast attack here, ratio to your liking. Though, keep in mind that you don't need to have extreme settings to get good results. In fact, I would argue that the best dynamic EQ settings are the ones that are so subtle that you can hear them even though they get the job done. As you can see or hear, we have a working dynamic EQ for our guitar, and we didn't spend hours in manual automation.
Wow!
But the fun doesn't stop here. In my example, we use internal sidechaining, but it was mostly to show you the impact of the dynamic EQ with a basic and visual example. So, this is where the fun begins, as it opens up a lot of possibilities for the mixing of your metal tracks. Usually, you would want to use a dynamic EQ between two tracks that are competing in the same frequency range in the mix. This is a powerful technique, as it will help you effortlessly, well mostly, to give breathing space to the source track that is triggering a sidechain without you touching any volume faders or automation panel. So that being said, let's go over the top 5 dynamic EQs combination that I would recommend you use in your mix. Number 1. Vocals EQing the guitars. An EQ dip around 1500 Hz will help you give more space to the vocals in the mix. That way, the harshness of the guitars will be less present and the vocals will naturally sound clearer. Number 2. Kick EQing the bass. An EQ dip at around 120 Hz to 150 will help to give more body to the kick in the mix, especially when the kick and the bass are doing 8 or 16 notes. I usually compensate by adding a bit of 60 Hz to the bass so we are not thinning out the bass. Number 3. Lead guitars EQing the rhythm guitars. An EQ dip around 1500 to 2000 Hz will help to give more space to the lead guitars. This is exaggerated, of course, so you can hear the difference. Number 4. Lead synth EQing the pads or the strings. An EQ dip at around 3k Hz for this particular synth here will help to give more space to the lead synth. Number 5. Vocals EQing the delay or the reverb. An EQ dip around 2k Hz will help to give more space to the vocals in the mix while maintaining a good amount of reverb or delay. And number 6, which is a bonus, even though we already mentioned it, you can also use a dynamic EQ to control the low frequencies of the palm mutes of the guitar. If you have more ideas, let me know in the comments. Also, keep in mind that for any of the examples I showed you in my top 5, you can also use a multiband compressor to achieve the same thing, but I found that the dynamic EQs is more transparent and easier to use. And it could also be a good idea to use both actually. So, that's it for me today. I hope that you learned something new and that you will use the dynamic EQ in your next metal mix. Thank you all for watching and see you in the next video. Bye bye.